All right, let's go ahead and get this meeting started. Today is Monday, September the 11th, 2023 at 4:30 p.m. in the Nat U Hill Meeting Room here in Monroe County, Indiana. I call this meeting to order, and I'll note for the record that Councilmember Crossley and Councilmember Iverson are present, and that Councilmember Wiltz is en route. So we will have those folks there, Councilmember Wiltz here soon. As we're looking at today's agenda, which again, for all of you here visiting, all of our materials are on the back table, so please feel free to grab materials. Councilmember Crossley, are there any changes to the agenda today?
I saw none.
All right, then do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
I'll second. All those in favor of adopting today's agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 2-0. All right, so we are going to start. And for those of you just joining, please grab materials on the back table. There she is.
This meeting is being recorded.
In case you didn't know.
For the record, Councilmember Wiltz is present in the Nat U Hill Meeting Room, and I need to, while she's getting settled, Councilmember Wiltz, we just approved the agenda, and I'm just getting on Zoom so I can share my screen. Just a second, please. Last meeting, we discussed treatment, and we, in an effort to give that topic as much credibility as we think it deserves, we heard from a number of agencies and spent over 3.5 hours in this room listening to agencies talk about what they're doing for treatment, where the gaps in services are. We also heard from our sheriff's department. So in that vein, we did our very best to distill what we heard in those 3.5 hours, and I spent the intervening time between last meeting and this talking with some of our service providers to get a better idea of just exactly where the gaps in care were. And we heard in particular that a lot of the treatment agencies, let me do this real quick. We're using the ASAM model to ensure that they were using the not only the best standards of care available, but also that they were able to use reimbursable models of care. And so in that vein, let me share my screen. We developed something of a, excuse me. Let me zoom in. This chart that you'll see here where based on the, let me zoom out so we can see the whole thing. Based on the ASAM level, we did our best to identify the individuals that were in the different agencies that were the different ASAM levels. And after developing this based on what we heard in public, I sent it out to different agencies, and we got some feedback, which I thought was really helpful. I'm gonna share that feedback now from let me get the right document here. Here we go. Thank you for your patience with me today. I want to make sure that I'm sharing the right documents with you all. You can see here that this document has been updated to indicate, based on conversations with not only Centerstone, Linda Grove, Paul, who's at the table here, but also Pinnacle, that there are indeed gaps in care in treatment, that if we follow the ASAM levels, that those gaps in care are highlighted, and that the gaps in care tend to be associated with a lack of payment at that level. As we move forward and we're hearing from the public about ways that we can increase care, that in terms of treatment, it is becoming increasingly apparent that as you go down the ASAM levels from early intervention to outpatients, then as you get more intensive, such as IOP, and then finally down at the very bottom to medically managed intensive inpatient services, that it is increasingly difficult to receive compensation for those services, and you're seeing that different agencies are not entering into those spaces. This is one of the challenges I think that we're facing in terms of determining which treatment levels to focus on here in Monroe County. And I think that I wanted to share this chart with you all to kind of indicate that what we heard at our last session has really brought home some challenges that we have not only locally, but also here in this state. Let me pause there for questions or comments. Let me make sure that my colleagues don't have any questions or comments, and then I'll kick it around.
No.
All right, Mayor Hamilton.
Sorry. Just so I understand, that's very helpful. Thank you. Does it reflect anything about the volume of care available when payment is in one of those categories? But do we have any sense that we have enough capacity?
I am going to point out my own ignorance in this area and ask if our representative from Centerstone can address that question.
Same thing.
Yeah, I did send a document to Peter that indicates like where substance residential treatment facilities are throughout the state, as well as the kind of the transitional housing. There are some information, there is some information around capacity. It really depends on what you're looking at. You know, that grid that Peter has up there, there's ASAM really is only for substance. That's the only thing ASAM covers. That is not mental health. So I think that's important to keep in mind. So what I did on that was I said, but basically those levels of care are comparable, right? So, you know, early intervention, kind of basic outpatient treatment, that next level, if you need inpatient, those are comparable to mental health treatment as well. And then just kind of went through and talked about sort of whether or not there was payment available for it and to what kind of.
Mayor Hamilton, can you speak into the mic so that closed caption can pick up?
He was just asking about capacity. And the problem with capacity is if you don't know what the need is, it's hard to estimate capacity. So, you know, we can demonstrate, like I say, that presentation I sent Peter, and I assume you can, you know, give that out as well. It shows how many beds are available for substance residential. There's like 2,500 beds in the state any given day. Now, what's capacity? I don't know that even statewide, you could estimate that. But we do know from experience, there's a lot of substance residential and there's not much transitional housing after that. So if we look at the number of beds that you have for somebody to go to inpatient substance residential, then it's significantly less. But if you're looking at mental health treatment, and I know, you know, somebody had said here, like, oh, we really want to have something that's comparable to substance residential. And I know I mentioned this last week, there isn't anything like that. The substance residential has a Medicaid waiver that pays for 28 days roughly. There's nothing like that on the mental health treatment side. So what you're seeing is, if you're saying, hey, you want to go in a longer term treatment, you know, as I asked the Pinnacle treatment person last time, insurance pays for 3 to 5 days. So if you want somebody to go into some intensive, outpatient or inpatient treatment, there is no such thing that's paid for. So,
Yeah, let me pull up.
so there's a big gap there. Like we know, there's a very huge gap.
So that folks here and on Zoom can see, I'm going to
Yeah.
pull up that slide deck and just kind of race through that if you don't mind.
Sure.
Let me go ahead and share my screen again.
Yeah, so this is the ASAM criteria. I think what's helpful with this slide and the reason why I included it is it just basically said from, if you just think about a continuum of care, it starts from you don't need anything till you need the most intensive. So it's a good way to think about treatment, period. And then those particular things that were highlighted, the 0.5, 1, 2, 3, 4, those are really the big levels. So kind of just says, here's what those levels are. And then it just goes through how are those decisions made, what are each of those points, just for people's frame of reference. And those 6 multidimensional statements are all of the things that are taken into consideration when you look at medical necessity. And medical necessity is imperative because if you don't have it, insurance won't pay for it. So one of the big things that we run into with medical necessity, let's say for substance residential, is if somebody's been sitting in jail for maybe more than 2 weeks, oftentimes they no longer meet substance or medical necessity when we want them to go into substance residential because they've detoxed the amount of time since they've last used. Now, we've spent a lot of time with the insurance companies kind of talking to them about it, but it is a factor when you're looking at a person who's been out of circulation.
And for those in the Nat U Hill room, closed captioning is hiding dimension 5, which reads relapse, continued use, or continued problem potential, exploring an individual's unique needs that influence their risk for relapse or continued use.
Right. And then this is just the overall bed. So that's kind of what I was referencing. That 3.5 is the substance residential, which is like 28-day bed or 28-day facility. So right now there's about 2,500 beds. But if you look at 3.1, and that is really that transitional housing. So if you think about the fact when somebody needs that 3.5, they almost always need that 3.1 next. So if you're going into a very intensive, you've been actively using, and people say, like, if I just get discharged and I go back to where I was before and I don't have any, in-house kind of support, the chances of me being able to maintain are very slim. So at a minimum, you should have at least 2,500 beds on the substance residential transitional piece. And that's something that we're advocating for. And I think in terms of recommendations, really supporting the recovery housing is a really, really important piece and a component that is missing in our community. And then, 3 combined that have both 3.1 and 3.5 together. So
I think that's it.
no, I think there's a little bit more.
Oh, there we go. Yep.
Yeah, that just gives the name of the facilities and by location. So I think, it's just a nice resource for people to say, hey, where are they? Who are the people that are providing that? So that's the 3.5, and I think the last slide is the 3.1. Yeah. And then I guess I included NR because that's Indiana Recovery Residences. And sometimes, like Mark DeLong talked about the fact that Amethyst has 3.1. Well, that's how they're getting paid by Medicaid. Some providers have chosen not to do 3.1 and instead do Indiana Recovery Residences. Both are certified by Division of Mental Health and Addictions. And I know several other providers are doing NR certification as opposed to 3.1, but it's comparable. And then that just talks about what those levels are based on for NR, which nice reference. And then here are the recovery residences. So there's 166 with 2,000 beds. And again, maybe 2 years ago, that was about 250 beds. So people are getting it, and it is moving that direction. And I know I've worked closely, like in Columbus, and, you know, we've gone from, you know, maybe having, I don't know, a couple dozen beds to a couple hundred now. So I think, you know, if the community really comes together, and the biggest piece is really helping with the startup. And I know Courage to Change kind of talked about that, getting the facilities, getting it up and running, and some of that staffing in the beginning. But once you get it up and running, it's, you know, you can usually financially make it work. And I think that's it.
Thank you. We also, let me stop sharing, had a question online about what if someone has private insurance? How does that impact their ability to receive treatment?
Yeah, private insurance, there are definitely facilities that accept private insurance. So it's really just a question of kind of finding out where insurance matches.
And what about those who don't have private insurance?
Well, it depends on kind of what their situation is. Again, it's Indiana Medicaid is based on income, and so most people are eligible. As long as they're income eligible, then, you know, you're calling a provider, they're going to make sure that you get it in. Also, providers like Centerstone, there are other ones. We just actually applied for a DMHA waiver that pays for people if insurance refuses or you don't have insurance. So we have a grant that allows us to pay for that gap. And I know actually today we just received notice that we received that again, but that allows us for people who don't have it.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
So the takeaway here is residential housing, recovery, transitional housing. All right, are there any other questions on treatment and the status here in Indiana and ways that we can move forward as a community? All right, I'm looking at Zoom. Are there any questions that we didn't get to here? Okay. In that case, if there's no more questions on treatments, then we'll go to our next item on the agenda, which is our weekly focus, which today is jail treatment and construction. What investments can the county council make for the construction and operation of a jail in Monroe County? I'm going to expand that just a little bit and talk about not just a jail, but also co-located facilities that would be at a location as well. On your agenda, on number 4, it lists myself, Councilor Iverson, and Scott Carnegie. Mr. Carnegie is a representative with DLZ, the firm that the Board of Commissioners has contracted to provide architectural services. He's here to answer questions, and should we need him, we can go that route. In the meantime, let me start my presentation, and then immediately afterwards, Sheriff Marte and his team will give their presentation, and then we'll go forward with a discussion on construction operation of a jail. Then we'll have significant time set aside for public comment, so you all can come up and provide public comment. At that time, we will be keeping public comment to 3 minutes per commenter, so please adjust your comments accordingly, and then we will adjourn. All right, let's go ahead and share my screen. And we'll start with, today we're going to talk about planning of new institutions, which is, the acronym is PONY. This is a training that is put on by the National Institute of Corrections. The Board of Commissioners brought the National Institute of Corrections to Monroe County, what was it, 4 or 5 weeks ago or so? And it was a significant investment of public funds in that we had a board of judges there, we had the Board of Commissioners there, County Council was there, as well as administrative and departmental staff of Monroe County. This is the first opportunity that I have, and I think it's an appropriate time to bring what we learned in this training forward, because I think it's incredibly germane to where we are right now as a community. So let me, I would need to provide two caveats at this point. This was a 3-day long training. I am not going to go through 3 days of training in a PowerPoint slide. So suffice it to say that these booklets, these training booklets, are available to you. We have a copy in the county council office. You can leaf through it. There are 10 chapters that they went through. Today we'll be covering 5 of them. So there's a lot here. The other thing that I'll say is that what I'll be presenting is mostly information from the Department of Corrections, or excuse me, the National Institute of Corrections, and very little is going to be kind of our own analysis at this point, because I think it provides a roadmap to the future, which we will discuss here. So today we're going to go through the phases of construction and the timeline. That's also a handout that you have. We'll talk about site selection, the functional program, and the space program. All 3 of those are pre-architectural. That is to say, they lead to the architectural processes of design. And then finally, we'll talk about staffing and operation, which is once we have once a building is constructed, how do you maintain its operation? So we're starting with the phases of construction and the timeline. According to the National Institutes of Correction, and DLZ has a similar phase chart, there are 9 phases. You have these 9 phases in your handout, and they go with this chart here. Phase 1 is project recognition. In this community's case, it was an initial lawsuit indicating that the care was not constitutional, and our initial conversations with those organizations. And then phase 2 was the needs assessment. This is when the Board of Commissioners commissioned 2 reports, one from Ken Ray, one from Eve Hill. Then we formed the CJRC, the Community Justice Response Committee. That body was no longer in existence, or it was put on hold, excuse me, and then we created the Justice Fiscal Advisory Commission, which is what we have here now. The National Institutes of Correction suggest that should take 6 to 8 months. We took a little longer, but I think we're back on track now. Those are the completed phases. The upcoming phases, where we're headed, is phase 3 is a facility program development. This is where we are going to be, we'll talk about this in a little bit in more depth, but 4 to 6 months to determine what activities are going to be taking place in the buildings that will be at the land that we eventually choose. Phase 4 is project management and implementation. This includes facility design and conceptual design. That'll take 6 to 12 months. Phase 5 is the design phase. That's where we'll be working with DLZ to work on schematic designs, design development, and construction documents. That'll take 8 to 12 months. Phase 6 is the bidding and negotiation for construction of the new facilities. This is the bids and the final go, no go, and that'll take an estimated 2 to 4 months. The final phases, phase 7 is construction. That we're estimating is going to take 18 to 36 months. Phase 8 is then occupation and operation. That's when the sheriff and his team will finish up their punch list, finish up the furnishings, and then start moving people over into the new buildings, as well as any co-located apartments. And then phase 9 is post-occupancy. That's when the sheriff and his team will be fine-tuning their policies and procedures with the transition team, which you're going to talk about in a little bit, assess the operations, and ensure preventative maintenance. And that's another 6 to 9 month process. All in all, if you chart that onto a timetable, it looks something like this. Site selection. We right now have heard from a number of different bodies here in Monroe County that the Thompson site is a site where we have asked for environmental as well as geologic studies to be done. The county commissioners have approved that those bids go out, and work on that is either begun or is about to begin, and we have not heard yet any completed results on that process. I'm looking over at County Attorney Jeff Cockrell. Did I get that right?
Yes.
Excellent. Always good when you got it right with the attorneys. The next phase is the design phase. This is where we'll be designing facilities to go into the approved site. Then we'll be bidding out for that work. Then we'll be constructing those buildings and those facilities. Then we'll go into occupancy and operation. And finally, we'll do post-occupancy. So you see our timelines are long here. We do not anticipate, even with everything going well and to plan, that occupancy of any new building would happen before or around the spring of 2027. Let me back up, and I just want to look over to DLZ. Do you have anything to add at this point? Can you turn your mic on, please? It's a press conference.
The only thing that I would add is your phase 3 and phase 4, it's what we commonly refer to as the pre-design services. So that's the programming, the master planning, and conceptual design.
That's really helpful. So as I'm referencing National Institute of Corrections work, there's going to be some differentiation between what DLZ is going to be bringing forward. So that's helpful. All right, that's phases of construction timeline. Let's talk about site selection. This is phase 4. We're talking about crucial criteria and maintaining community support. We started with developing site evaluation criteria. This, in our case, was could a plot of land be large enough? Was it zoned right? All those things. Then we identified potential sites that fit that criteria. We did preliminary evaluations, and with the help of multiple departments, made a short list of preferred sites, which you saw the other night. You heard us analyzing 4 separate sites. And then we are right now in the detailed site analysis. Again, we have contracted out through the Board of Commissioners for environmental and geologic studies to be done to determine if there's limestone right underneath the soil and we can even build there. We don't know yet. As soon as we get those reports back, you will know. We are very invested in moving this project forward in a responsible way that is transparent. And as soon as we know anything from our detailed site analysis, we will know. We will continue to seek public comment. I know that my colleagues have been receiving comment. I know I've been receiving public comment. And please keep it coming. This is exactly what we're here for. We want to be hearing about what we need to be considering as we receive detailed site analysis and moving forward. The next step after detailed site analysis, or even could be beginning soon, is the functional program. But before I go to functional program, I wanted to look over to my colleagues if they have any comments or questions at this point. The functional program is phase 3. This is essentially the phase that we're at right now. What activities are going to be going on in any number of buildings that will be at a site? Who will be there doing those activities? And what are the functions of the different facilities? The functional program is a narrative. It contains a mission statement, scenarios for significant functions, such as where are the courts? Who can get to the courts? Where is the jail? How can people move in and out of the jail? Can we move inmates in a responsible manner? Where is the kitchen going to be? Those sorts of things. Initial thoughts on adjacency needs, as well as functional descriptions of the spaces that will be developed, and goals for each functional component. It is important that we have public input in this process. As we are trying to determine what activities take place in these buildings, it is important to hear from the public what exactly that would look like. The components of a functional program look something like this. I know that's hard to see actually, so let me read those out a little bit for you. But think about what are the activities, and this is specifically for a jail. Housing, what does housing look like in a jail? What does booking and release look like? What does healthcare look like? Master control, visitation, food service, recreation, exercise, programs, support services, parking, administration, staff, storage, and inmate movement. Already in CJRC, we heard a lot of public feedback that we want individuals to have access to outdoor recreation. We also heard, not only from the sheriff, but from others, that we want to have increased programming going on in the jail from our community organizations. This process, this functional program process, is where we take that feedback and we start putting it into that narrative piece. We also, for those who have been to the different jails on tours, have seen that this functional program is key to maintaining our quality staff that work in the sheriff's department. So what we've seen in Hamilton County is they did a survey of their staff and they said, we want our own gym. And so there's a nice, shiny gym there. Or maybe that's in Hamilton County, Ohio. It's in one of them. I get lost. There's also locker space dedicated to staff so they can lock their personal possessions in their lockers. They don't have to take them out on the job with them. This list here is not an end-all be-all, but it's more of a thought exercise to get us thinking about what does the functional program then look like for co-location components. This list here is not an exhaustive list. This list is not a prescriptive list, but more of to kind of get folks thinking, what are the activities that are going to be happening in a treatment facility if we have one? What about probation and public defender and their staff? What about the judges and their staff? What about the road deputies and the investigators that work with the sheriff? What do those activities look like? And that's the work that we're going to be doing going forward here. The functional program team has been recommended by as recommended by the National Institute of Corrections looks something like this. User group, representatives from a jail for the jail, or representatives from the prosecutor's department for the prosecutor's offices, representatives from the public defender from their public defender's offices, representatives from the road team for the road, or from the road deputies for the road crews, and so forth and so on. Making sure that the county planning team is involved. This is the commissioners, the council, community advisory group members. That could be you all, as well as individuals that are familiar with architecture. The third of the four groups is the programming team. This is community justice planning consultants that we might want to bring into the process. And then the fourth of the four teams is the AE team, the architect and engineer team. So you have these four components of team members making sure the functional program is appropriate. One of the other items that the functional team would be doing is looking at inmate management philosophy. What you see on your screen here is how jails have been built for a very long time, using a linear model. And I'm going to pause here before I go too deep into this. Sheriff Marte has experience in this area, so Sheriff Marte, as I go through this, please feel free to chime in. This is called the linear design. It's where inmates are locked into a cell along a long corridor, and the correctional officers will do their shifts, so the inmates will see someone every once in a while. As we move forward in our thoughts about the philosophy of inmate management and working with inmates and seeing their humanity, the podular system has become very popular. And DLZ is here today, and of course, feel free to chime in too about this. There's two main podular approaches here. One is the podular remote surveillance, where day rooms or pods are set up and observation posts are in the middle. Hamilton County, Indiana is built like this. So for those of you that were at Hamilton County, you saw this type of podular system. The podular direct supervision is what's on the right-hand side. This is the inside of a jail in Hamilton County, Ohio. And you can see here, just beyond where the people are standing, is where the correctional officer actually has their desk. They're in the pod with the inmates and developing relationships and working with them. Sheriff Marte, do you have anything to add at this point? All right. So this is going to be part of the functional program too. What type of inmate management philosophy are we going to be having? Before we head on into the space program, I'm going to look at my colleagues. Any questions or comments at this point? Okay. The space program talks about what buildings are needed, what rooms are needed. This is phase 5 on your handouts. This derives directly from the work of the functional program and the team that writes the functional program. Again, it's about size and character of the space for the activities that have been defined. So this is needed because it determines the quantity and size of each type of room, what type of equipment goes in each room. So does this room need a refrigerator? Does it need a computer? You know, et cetera, and the space required to make that equipment work, electrical, mechanical, et cetera. One of the points that needs to be made really clear here, and hopefully I've made this before, is that public comment is vitally important to this process. As we move forward, one of the pieces that National Institute of Corrections kept hammering home was, it is not the role of the architect to decide what the community needs. It is the role of the community to tell the architect what we need. So again, it is vitally important that we are hearing from the public at every single phase that you have in your hand and your handout. Issues to address when we get to space programming is the aesthetics. Is it accessible, flexible? A lot of the jails that we've been to have been LEED certified. Does that fit in this community? What about engineering issues? Again, we mentioned karsts and limestone. What about security systems? Right now, we've been hearing from our sheriff that some of the locking mechanisms are just not functioning as well as they could be in the jail. What are we thinking about for security systems in the new place? What about future expansion? And I encourage you not to think about expansion of a carceral institution as much as expanding in terms of there will be co-located Monroe County departments there. What do we do when there's an additional nonprofit or additional community service that needs to be out in that facility? Can we expand that? What if we have additional needs in our courts? What if we have additional needs in our prosecutor's office? Can we expand to fit those needs? And then thinking about standards, the American Correctional Association or federal, state, and local standards. How can we make sure that we're adhering to those as well? Then finally, this is of great importance to a fiscal body. We need to be working with what you all came up with and assigning that to space. Net square foot, coming up with departmental grosses, and then finally coming up with the building gross square footage. One of the ways that we are going to be determining a lot of the cost and a lot of looking at our budgetary requirements is based on that GSF. And I'll get into that in a second, but I want to pause here. DLZ, do you have any comments at this point?
No, I think everything you've said is correct.
Well, I'm parroting the National Institute of Corrections, so. Then once we have that space concern, or that space, the gross space there, then we need to find a balance between cost, quantity, and quality. So typically, quantity reductions have the greater impact on reducing costs. So if we find we're over budget, then we need to be looking at that square footage. That's coming down the pike, and that's gonna have a great role for the county council as we're considering fiscal issues. That concludes the space program. Pause for any questions from my colleagues. Let me pause at this point. Everything here is pre-architectural. This is all before the design. This leads up to the design. Now we're going to be talking about the operations of the building after it's been constructed and the staffing of these different buildings. So the staffing is vitally important because over the lifetime of a jail, and indeed the buildings that we'll be having on a site, the largest cost is going to be our investment in people. We need to be making sure that we're getting that right. So how do we do that? Well, according to the National Institute of Corrections, we need to be conducting a staffing analysis. They suggest a 10-step process that is based on the industry standard of the net annual work hours. During the actual training, Sheriff Marte and I were at the same table, and we started going through this, and it's a lot, but I think it's definitely worth it to think about as we're building a new facility. How do we right size our staffing? And again, not just in a correctional facility, but also in any of the co-located facilities that are out there. All right. I blazed through that on purpose, but hopefully you heard what you needed to hear. And also, I want to pause here for any questions that this table might have at this point. This table. Yes.
Yes, thank you, Councilor Iverson. This is all very interesting. My question is more of a general one. It's so general, I don't even know how to say it. Like, what are we doing here? I mean, this is all great information. It would have been great to have it, a year ago. But how does it relate to the purpose of this commission or committee? I'm sorry.
That's a great question. I'm going to take a stab at this, and then I'll look to you two to correct what I just said. This body is slated to have its final meeting in 1 week. Next week, we will be delivering the consolidated recommendations that we've had since June. We need to be moving forward. There are recommendations that have come out of the conversations that we need to be investing in, soon. There are recommendations that we need to invest in at a much later date, but we are at the point now where we need to be writing that functional program. We need to be writing that and then leading into the space program, because very soon we're going to be getting environmental and geological reports back from a site. And if they're favorable, then we need to be working with the community to make sure that we are moving forward on those functional pieces. I present this to today and to the public because this is the roadmap by which I think we are going to need to be moving forward after this body concludes. It seems very clear to me, based upon what I heard the National Institute of Corrections, and for those who were on the call or here in the room that were at the training, feel free to chime in, but it's time to move on to the next phase. And what's before you in your handout are the different phases. And we've been at needs assessment for a while. And it's time to, in my opinion, time to move forward.
I think that basically characterizes where we are it looks lovely on paper, and I really appreciate you laying it all out. The relationship between what we've been doing in this room and this process is a little ambiguous. I feel like we're taking everything that we're hearing in here from a pretty diverse group of stakeholders in the public and trying to, in our report, consolidate and prioritize from a fiscal perspective. So not considering site or some of these other things, but really a lot about the programming, a lot about space, but still at that higher level of what are the priorities as we've heard them over the past few months. And that should feed back into then this process, although this process still requires a lot of input and requires a lot of human resources to accomplish. So I'm a little anxious, concerned about how we get through this process. And I think we need some more discussion about taking these next steps and it's going to be expensive to do just this process, I guess is where I'm coming from. So, how do we fund that? I've heard that transition teams are needed and frequently you hire people to do that. Is that something that we are considering. So I know I'm not answering, I'm actually questioning a lot of things as well, but that's where my head is about this and your question.
I think you guys summed it up, so I have nothing else further to add.
Yes.
As we're talking about this process, I'm just trying to get a sense of, a little bit more narrow sense of what we're talking about. So what departments are tentatively planned to be co-located with the jail? I asked that because we went through the 9 steps and I'm trying to understand where that question falls.
In my mind, and I'm going to take a stab, in my mind, that's gonna come out in the next 2 phases of the functional program as well as the space program. I haven't seen anything that says that this department and that department are definitely moving. They'll be on the northeast corner or the southeast corner, and this is how it's gonna be. I think that's the conversations that Councilmember Wiltz was just referencing that's gonna take a lot of time and effort to do. But at this point, I don't know.
In those next 2 stages, as you're working through those process and making those decisions, is there a plan for an evaluation of the extent of the negative impacts if you do not co-locate all the courts, the jail, and all, at least the attorney's office probation? I was just wondering if anyone's looked at that, things like transportation vehicles, the type of staffing you're going to need, holding in case they're not located. I'm assuming now you have a bunch of employees traveling back and forth. Just some of the negative fiscal impacts that I think are going to result because you don't have those expenses now.
Sure. I have not seen an analysis. That doesn't mean that it doesn't exist, but I haven't seen one.
Okay. Is there a plan to do one, do you know?
As far as I know, I'm not aware of one. However, I also, don't know if the Board of Commissioners have considered that either. So I simply don't know.
Thank you.
I would just like to add to that particular point. I think I had mentioned this in a joint meeting that we had a couple of weeks ago with the county commissioners and council when we were discussing the site locations with DLZ. And to your point, I do think that it is important for us to look into that because as a fiscal person, 1 of 7, I like to say the staying in my lane. But in doing that, I would like to see what that will look like because I do think that particular departments, it could have a significant financial impact if we do not co-locate certain ones. In particular, if we decide to, I know there were talks about court services going into the facility and whatnot and what that would look like. And to me personally, I would only imagine that it would be expensive and also a safety standpoint for both, correctional officers and inmates themselves to be transported back and forth between the new proposed site, what we decide, and downtown if it were to stay downtown as well. So I do hear what you are saying. I know that is something that I am very much interested in looking at. But again, I feel like a lot of these things, it's to break it down and how I understand it, is we are just the financial body. We don't have the final say in a lot of different things. However, we are still the financial body. So I think that also speaks for itself. So while we might have certain things that are under our purview, not a lot of it is under our purview. But I do think that we can use our power and on the council to make sure that your concerns and other concerns that we've heard are definitely an input, and we take a look into that as well.
I agree. Are there any other questions? Mayor Hampton.
Sorry. And I apologize, I'm going to have to leave at about 10 minutes to 6. I don't know the timing of all this, but I guess the first comment I want to make is that I appreciate that you all have stepped in to a gap that I think you saw in the termination of a public committee that was trying to look at a whole bunch of these issues, and have stepped up to create a committee that includes you and then some non-voting folks for various reasons. And that's, I think, trying to help a process be more transparent, which I think is very good and helpful. And I know you invited 2 city representatives, which is also welcome, as well as the council representative, city administration. I guess I've spent a few hours here. Many of you spent many more. I try to bring judgment, try to help whatever judgment we can, or perspective or information, and there's a whole bunch of experts. I don't know how to react to this. I mean, these are, I don't know what size jail site is being looked for. I've heard different numbers. I don't know how you look for a site or how we respond to the search for a site unless you say it's got to be 24 acres, maybe 12, maybe 2, maybe. I have no idea how I can react to that or be any help. Okay, I want to be helpful. I think about 3 big questions that a fiscal group or a group like this maybe can help with. 1, we need a jail. How much is it going to cost? How much should we think about that? How should we think about that? And I have no doubt we need a new jail, new facility. 2, what goes with the jail in the criminal justice system? What's getting moved? What isn't getting moved? I have no idea about that, and I don't have any idea how you pick a site or plan until those kind of discussions are done. And then 3, and this is what I care very deeply about, is what besides the criminal justice system should we be investing in? And some of what you talked about, Sheriff, last time was, this is going to be many years. What do we invest in right now to improve not only the criminal justice system, but from my perspective, the justice system, the system of our community? And I feel like this body, I don't know how to be helpful, but we could make some comments about some of that, but I don't know how to react to, facility program development, site selection. We haven't been involved in that in any way, I don't think. And I don't know how we're supposed to endorse it or react to it. I'd love to endorse and react, and we only have 1 week left, right? We only have 1 week, 1 meeting left. Are we going to be discussing what we want to say to the group, you all? Because I don't feel like we've had the chance to do that in a very open way.
Thank you for your comments. And I think one of the benefits of this body is it allows people to say, you should be doing more of this. You should be doing more of that. We want to know more about this. And we welcome that. It really helps us make sure that not only we as the fiscal body are on the right track, but I know that there are members of the Board of Commissioners that are listening right now that are also hearing what you all are saying. I will say that next week's meeting, the last meeting, which is a week from today, is going to be going over a comprehensive list of recommendations that we heard from every single meeting. Right now, a draft form of that is up to 41 recommendations that are both short-term, medium-term, and long-term in implementation. We have heard a lot of feedback in these meetings, and we're going to be discussing all of it next week.
Are you going to be asking the non-voting members for votes or feedback on that, or what is our role in that process?
My understanding, and again, I don't want to speak for my colleagues, is that next week's meeting will be an opportunity for not only the members at this table to review those recommendations, but also for the members of the public to review those recommendations.
And are you asking us as a body to endorse, vote on, or just comment on? What are we going to take votes? Are we going to get the 41 recommendations ahead, or are we just?
The way that this body is set up is that we'll seek feedback and input on those, and then the 3 of us have the voting responsibilities and duties.
I want to say, finally, I appreciate that. I think you guys are trying to get input into a process that has been very, very difficult, and I appreciate that. And I think for myself, I want to try to be as helpful as I can, and it's just frustrating to figure out how to be helpful, but I'll keep trying. Thanks.
Thank you.
I guess I'll make a comment for next week because that, if I do believe, that's the one that I'm gonna chair. And just to kind of take it back, we are not, at least for me, and I'll speak for the other colleagues, we are not in this one mindset that we are not going to be listening to people and have the conversations. I think if we were not listening to anybody in this particular body, we wouldn't have this committee. We wouldn't be spending the time that we continue to spend and have that. So any input that we have received via email, from public comment, whether it's things that are in agreement or not in agreement with that, we hear the good, the bad, the ugly of all of the things related to this. I do agree that I think that we are trying to figure out what we can do right now. I definitely have spoken to that a couple of different times. I know, I'm not sure, in meetings that have been maybe missed, I encourage anybody that has missed those meetings to take a look, because we have really had a chance and have had conversations of those things, and some that we were desiring to have and former committees that we have not had. And I appreciate that this committee was formed for us to continue to have that. So I guess my concern as chair for next meeting is that I'm willing to listen to any and all input. I am not of this mindset and having a Napoleon complex of thinking that it is just one particular way or the county way. I'm all for listening to any suggestions, any financial suggestions, anything that we have that will come about. I'm definitely for hearing that, because we have things, as we heard from our sheriff's office, of what it would take or what it looks like if we don't invest in our community. We've heard public comment time and time again of why we are just thinking, to think outside the box of a facility and trying to think of things that we can do right now. I do think we are thinking of those things. I think we can also dream bigger. And I hope to have a robust conversation that I hope you and everybody else and folks in the back continue to come for our next meeting. Thank you.
In addition to having a document for review at the next meeting, I think I think that we need to think of the document that we are working on right now, that you will be seeing, as a draft recommendations from this committee. And I can work with my colleagues on this, although we're not allowed to speak to each other outside of this room in public. But my thought is we would have a period of time to get input. And so not only during the meeting, off the cuff, apologies for throwing it up at you and just getting that, I have an open period of time for written feedback, input, comment from this body, and incorporate that into a final document. So specific procedure to be determined, perhaps, but if my colleagues agree, that's what I'm envisioning.
Yeah.
Sorry, thank you. I think you guys are doing heroic work to try to assemble a very, very complicated set of, you've collected a whole bunch of information, and I appreciate that you'll be taking reactions to it. I guess one question I have is, and I haven't been to every meeting, so I apologize, but are we thinking about financing options? Like, have we looked at what capacity do we have to fund these things locally? And have we or should we talk about any of those? Because we could be helpful as a mix of folks saying we should think about these financing options. It's going to take X, Y, Z.
Yes, and the way that the draft document is right now is that we've ascribed every recommendation to a budgetary category. So personnel or services or contractual or capital. I think some of our recommendations are difficult to put a dollar amount on. Some of them are easier. And I think that categorization is helpful to help, identify which funding streams can best address each one of those recommendations. I think it'll become very evident once we release it and everyone's able to see it, where collaboration is not only preferred, but necessary. To Councilor Crossley's point, we are doing a bit of dreaming here. That's exactly the reason why we want Centerstone at the table to tell us this is the statewide situation and how can Monroe County play a role here? How do we get around this treatment issue? How do we make sure that if we build this correctional facility that it looks like nothing else that anybody has ever built in the United States? How do we make sure that we have the character of Bloomington and Monroe County in this facility so that we can, make sure that it takes on the character of what is in the Eve Hill report and is what came out of the JFAC. So, yes, I saw your question before you asked it.
Can you help me understand, so we're prepared for next week, what the scope of the recommendations are? And by that, I mean, are we talking about a list of things that we hope to see in the jail design or as part of co-location? Are we talking about only the categories that we've covered in this particular committee? Because some of them are not intercept points. They're actually the way the system works together. And I just want to make sure that we're prepared for the type of recommendations that we're actually providing.
Yeah, the way the draft document is structured is by the SIM intercept model points that we've discussed in each of these meetings. So, the first meeting was all about diversion. So what recommendations came out about diversion? What recommendations came out of the readings about diversion? What do we think would fit here? And it's organized like that. There are recommendations that came out of every single meeting that they were in every single meeting, and one of those is housing. We call those system-wide. They're just, every single meeting we heard we need more housing. And whether it's transitional or supportive or whatever, it was in every single meeting. There's a section where there are system-wide or overarching recommendations that are kind of like what you mentioned in the latter part of your question.
So just the intercept points that we've talked about, is that fair?
That's right. So we will not be discussing, let's see, what intercept models did we not do? We did not do a jail intercept model. We did not do on purpose because there's this, work that we have to do. But yeah, so it's only the intercept models that we discussed in these meetings.
Okay, will there be a later time for us to propose some design issues with the jail?
So again, voice of God, jeez. Oh, is that me? It is me. Oh man. All right. So, the answer is, I'm answering this as a single county council member with fiscal duties. My hope is that the answer is yes.
I think the opportunity is built into this stuff that he just talked about from the pony training that I was unfortunately unable to attend. So please correct me if I'm wrong, but it seemed as though part of the emphasis on these pre-architectural phases involved getting input on programming. And I'm looking to our DLZ consultant, he's nodding. So yes, I feel pretty confident in saying there will be opportunities for being more specific in your input on programming and facilities on site, once we have a site.
All right, I want to be respectful of time, so let's move on to a question of what is Sheriff Marte going to talk about?
We won't take too long.
You just said as long?
As I look at you. But no, seriously, I plan to piggyback a lot of the things that you said. Roughly about 4 to 5 months ago when we attended this pony training, Um, it was 3 long days. Flashback of college. Yeah. We learned a lot, and truly, it might not even be fair to a lot of people here because you didn't participate in this. So we'll try to narrow it down just a little bit in one particular topic for us because it's going to be very crucial for us to try to get it right as much as we can humanly possible, and that has to do with the transition team. According to the training that we received, these folks are going to really pretty much think of certain things that we might not think of as we're going through the actual process. What we want to avoid is that when the actual facility is completed, that we didn't miss anything that was crucial. And that's where the transition team come in. Now, the tricky part about that, it cannot be a staff, like for example, the jail commander or my chief doing this because the jail still goes on. That's not going to stop as we do this. And that's a 24/7 operation. It's like a city within the city. So it has to be new staff coming in and actually going by the pointing diagram and think of certain things of what would be beneficial, who will move with the jail type of deal. Those questions are very crucial, very important for our operation because I really want to make it safe for all of us, more efficient and more effective. So that's part of the transition responsibility. I'm going to pass the actual mic over here to the chief deputy. He's going to elaborate what we learned at that training, and then the jail commander is going to go to the PowerPoint, which is going to be short, and that's what I meant by that when I mentioned that would be kind of fairly quickly. But to me, what we took out of that training was actually the importance of that transition team and everything that they're going to be touching on from this point forward, because it's going to take some time. But for us, as we think about that, we also got to think about the operation of that facility because it doesn't stop. It's 24/7. Still working on it? Yeah, had it up, but it's not coming down.
You got that done, Commander? All right. I'm going to start off here, kind of piggybacking on something what Sheriff Marte said, and we kind of elaborated on here a little bit. But every jail I've ever been in, and I'll be willing to bet that you'll see our friend from DLZ nod his head in the affirmative when I make this statement. Every jail I've been in, I've had discussions when we were standing in the jail and we'll look around and go, who in the world designed this jail the way they designed it and what were they thinking? So what we're going to talk about here today is that it's our hope that when we talk about this transition team, this is what the transition team is designed to do, is to avoid that statement being made 10, 20, 30 years from now. So the transition team is that body that's going to, it is designed to take this thing from the start to the finish to make sure that all the I's are being dotted, all the T's are being crossed as we go through this process. And we're gonna, is it still not loud enough?
I'm hearing from people that can't hear you on Zoom land.
Okay, is that one better? Okay, let's try this one. Okay, so let's start off with the slides here, and we'll talk about as we go through there. But the first one here, and some of these get a little bit wordy, but they're very, very important. And this first one is just about says it all. We could probably, if we just have one slide, this would be it. But transition is a planning process. It's not an event. It's not just about the move. And what that means is, and you'll see a slide here in just a minute that kind of illustrates this, that when you hear the word transition, you think, okay, we're going to transition from an old facility to a new facility, and that involves, you know, the setting up of the new facility,
the transfer of, property and in this case, equipment and folks and staff, inmates, all of that. But it's not just about that. It starts very early on simply because of the incredible complexity of designing a new facility. So next slide. So this is, we're coming to this body here, and we have our budget presentation tomorrow, as a matter of fact, with the council. Time, energy, and money is going to be invested in this process. And what that is going to help us do is if we do this right, if we take the time, the energy, and yes, the funding, that's going to reduce the likelihood of any litigation that we have here in the future, and the negativity that comes with building a new facility in a community if you don't do it right. Hearing public input, hearing all of these things, and if you went through this pony training with it, they concentrated, just like Councilor Iverson said, very, very, very heavily on the public input part of this, and that's going to be part of what this transition team is going to do. This is very, very important. The planning of this operational change, and that's what this is going to be. It's going to be an operational change from a new facility to this old facility. And it's got to be established in the budget. And the transition team is going to be responsible for developing and implementing these changes. So that team is going to be the body that starts from A and goes to Z on every aspect of this new build. And well, this one here, fortunately, as far as building this new facility is going, this is about the only thing that's happened right so far. It's a very, very labor intensive thing. But what this is saying is that budget cycles don't necessarily coincide with the need for the staff or transition team. But in this case, it absolutely did. We went to this pony training in July. We had discussions about it, and we've been able to work this into our budget so that the council will be hearing this actually tomorrow. And this one here, the arrow that's the most important is covered up here, illustrates that the transition team, it starts at planning. It goes through the planning, design, construction, and occupancy phases. So in other words, we're already a little behind on the transition team. We've been doing some planning. We've been talking about site selection. We've been talking about all that stuff, absent a selection or a transition team. So we're already a little bit behind. We can catch up, but we've got to understand the importance of doing so. If you just stop and think about this, everything from where the kitchen goes, where the padded cells are going to be, how many single cells you need, how many, what the medical dorm is going to look like, where the toilets are going to be located, all of those things, where the electrical outlets are going to be. That's all important when you're talking about a secure facility. So there are literally thousands and thousands of tasks and things that have to be looked at. And what this slide is trying to illustrate is that there are some agencies, I believe, that have tried to say, okay, we can do this. We can do this with the current team that's at your facility, and you have, ad hoc meetings where you come together and say, okay, let's talk about this today. Then you do that for 2 hours, and then you go back to your job. It's simply a pipe dream to think that with this size of a project that you can pull some staff out and have them do this on a part-time basis. And it's probably going to require more than 40 hours a week. And it's got to be a team that's led by a competent and team coordinator that kind of puts all this together and works with our design team to make it all happen. And this is the key point here, and we've already touched on this. Our jail administrator here. If you think about the scope of the task of the transition team, and we say, well, our jail commander is the perfect person for that. Well, I'd say the answer to that is he is the perfect person for it. But he's also the perfect person to run our facility here. And the mayor even talked about this a little bit here. There's things going on right now, and Sheriff Marte has talked about this numerous times. We're going to be in that building till January 2028 if we're lucky. So, that task has to continue on. His skills, his leadership, and that part has to continue on uninterrupted because we're talking about lives here. He's got to stay on task with that. So here's the key points that I want to point out to you. That transition planning, it starts early. It requires a team. It requires extra staff. It's a full-time job. It's not part-time. It means training. You've got new and you got veteran staff, but each one of those have to be trained in. It can mean seeking consultation for help on that transition. It's a long-term project. So what we project out here, that we're out to 2028, that's how long the transition team is going to be functioning here. It requires funding. And it's essential for moving into the new facility, safety, effectively, and efficiently. So all of those things are going to be very, very important. This last slide here just kind of, it pulls it all together here, that it just scratches the surface of all of these details and all of these fine points that a team is going to have to undertake and that are going to be responsible for. It's going to take a lot of effort. We can't wait till construction starts. Think about that team. And there are fiscal considerations associated with that team. So the last slide here, this didn't come from any of us three. Every bit of this is copy and pasted from the pony train. So these are the people that came to us from the Department of Justice, the National Institute of Corrections, and gave us 3 days of things to think about. And that we all kind of approached with dread, but when we all came out of there, it was like, it was one of the most enlightening things I went through in my career. It truly was, because it just demonstrated to me that even after 40 years of doing this, I still had a lot to learn. I still have a lot to know. And there's a big, big undertaking in front of all of us here. And we have the opportunity, and I think we're well on our way to do it very, very right. But we also have the opportunity to do it very, very wrong if we don't approach this thing in a very systematic, a very open, a very transparent manner, and understanding all of the aspects of what this takes. It's not just building a jail. There are many, many, many things that we've got to think about as we approach this. And I love what Councilor Ivins said. It's time to move. It is time to move. We've got to get moving. We've got to avoid the paralysis through analysis thing here. And I think we're on our way here. So that's kind of what we wanted to handle this transition team, because it's so very, very important to our agency that we get this team up and running so that we can start contributing in a very, very effective way to what DLZ is going to be presenting to us in the very, very near future.
Joe Commander.
I don't really have a lot to add to what Chief Deputy Parker just said. I'll just say this. My grandfather instilled in me at a young age, anything worth doing is worth doing right the first time. And through the pony training, he was very clear, well, they were very clear in saying, you've got an opportunity to get it right the first time, because it becomes very cost ineffective to go back and fix things that we did not communicate on and get done right the first time.
That concludes our presentation. The main thing for us, again, and I'll echo what the jail commander said, we got to get it right as much as we can the first time. We don't want to look back and miss this opportunity to really get the public input. people that have done this before listen to their mistakes and what worked well. And this is Monroe County. We definitely could be very unique. But keep in mind that as we move forward, there's going to be growing pains. We're not going to agree on everything. But the best intentions are what we have in mind. But at the same time, just consider that we still have a city that continues, although this process is moving forward, and we must move forward.
Gentlemen, thank you for your presentation, and I know the community is grateful for your expertise in these areas, and thank you for sharing that today. Are there comments or questions from my colleagues? Looking around the table, are there any questions or comments on the Sheriff's Department and their presentation? All right. Before we move into public comment, are there any other outstanding questions or comments from this body? Yes.
Yes, I was wondering how far in advance of next Monday's meeting we will get the draft report or recommendations.
That is a good question. If we said 24 hours, that would land on a Sunday, and that's probably not very helpful. If we said 48 hours, that gives you the weekend. Is that fair?
That would work for me.
All right, let me...
I mean, the sooner the better.
Yeah.
I recognize it's a draft, and it may be still in progress of change, but like Friday afternoon to Monday is tight.
Okay.
So the sooner the better, understanding it may still be in progress.
Tell you
would be
what,
my thought.
even if it's ugly, you'll get something that you can react to. Is that what? I will shoot for close of business on Thursday.
Thursday.
Is that okay? All right. Is it okay with you all? Let me look over to, yeah, all right, yeah, that'll work. That'll come from our council office. It will not come from any of the three of us. So, yeah. Do you have a question or a comment? No? I feel like you have so much. You have so much.
Just thinking about this week and the schedule. That's all.
Yeah, we have 3 budget hearings this week, so just when you get it, just appreciate the work that went into it. All right, it is now time for us to take public comment. I would ask those at the table to, if you could, make space for public commenters. TSD, could we put a 3-minute clock up? If you were making public comment here in the Nat U Hill room, we ask that you sign this piece of paper and just sign in. If you're in the room coming and offering public comment, we have a chair and a microphone for you. As you've heard, these microphones are very finicky, so get as close as you can when you're making public comment. So if you would like to make public comment, I will take the first person that comes up. Come on up. Yep.
Hello. Well, I was quite shocked. I know my time is running. I did a quick run around, I thought, to people I could get to in my neighborhood, because I think it's really important that the surrounding neighborhoods are also considered stakeholders, and that our opinion and the effect on our lives that it will have be taken into consideration as well.
I'm sorry, point of order. If you can just, as people are making public comment, if you can just state your name for the record.
My name is Tara Deppert, and I live at the corner of Countryside Lane and Boulder Court in RCA. So I have some concerns because I'm right there at the intersection, but those concerns I'll put off for a moment. What I think is important is that when I found out that this site was pretty much chosen, not chosen, and that funding is going to be allocated next week, right? Is that right? September 18th. Sunday, I finally just sat down, typed up a flyer and said, I need to get out to the neighbors because you had mentioned this meeting was happening. This was our chance for public comment, and it looks like it's a last chance for public comment before funding's allocated to research that site. And it looks to me like, and I have been lax in paying attention because I really didn't think our site was a serious consideration. To me, it seemed obvious something outside of the city, away from the residential areas, seemed more, just seemed like a no-brainer to me. But I understand that you spent a lot of time in this room, and I've been back through your documents and you've discussed it, and I totally support myself the building of a new jail. I was very impressed with Sheriff Marte's comments about the need for it. I did go out and talk to neighbors that I felt were in the most vulnerable areas, and I understand Habitat for Humanity spoke last time. I thought they might be here. Maybe they will be some representatives here from that. My main concern is I think you should put a hold on allocating funding until you can have a meeting where everybody can be contacted. I couldn't get to everybody, especially down along the back of RCA Park. But I think it's important that you reach out to those stakeholders and see them as serious stakeholders. A neighbor who worked 37 years at Bob Evans just passed away a couple of weeks ago. He's left his daughter and his wife with only his home as his asset. And I'm just saying there are important people in my neighborhood that want to be heard. And many of them I invited today. And if I could gotten to more, I would have invited them as well. Okay.
Thank you so much.
What? Oh, sign.
For your comments. All right, I'm looking on Zoom and I don't see additional individuals wanting to make comments. So whoever's next in the Nat U Hill room, please come forward. You're welcome at this table. Well, we have the sign-in up here. Yeah. I spilled a glass of water at the very beginning and forgot to put the sign up in the back, so it's my fault. Yeah.
Hi, so this was a lot of information. I wasn't able to make it to the last meeting, but this is a lot of information. My name is Whitney Meeks. I work with Indiana Recovery Alliance, and we had one person say, something along the lines of things that we could do right now, starting right now, and that is Hep C treatment and testing inside the jail, and that's something that Indiana Recovery Alliance is prepared to do. And we also have a care coordinator that would work with folks who are reactive. And that is something that IRA is prepared to do and is ready at the word go. As a person separated from my employment, I did want to ask if there were any non-white voters who have been incarcerated in the past 12 years on this body.
That's very specific. I do not think so. We have someone who's formerly incarcerated. That person appears to be white. And we've heard from public commenters from people of color who were incarcerated, and I'm not sure how long ago.
Okay. Reading the report that was done about the disparities between Monroe County and the representation of Black folk in jail, it was something that I would have definitely something that I feel like should be addressed. If the jail is a reflection of who we are as a community, I don't feel like that's us. And and if we're going into talking about 20, 30 years down the line, we need to consider how progressive Bloomington will be at that time period, and we need to be talking about methadone maintenance inside our jails, as well as Hep C testing and treatment that could happen now. That's all I have. Thank you so much. This was great information.
Thank you for your comment. Welcome. You're welcome at this table.
Hi. I'll do that in a minute. So I started coming to the CJRC, Debbie Fish. I can't believe I didn't do that.
Thank you, Debbie.
I usually represent Hope for Prisoners Task Force at the Unitarian Universalist Church. I represent them now. I started coming to these meetings about 10 months ago, and it was the CJRC meeting. And I heard about 4 sites, 3 in the city that could be possible, and 1 in the county. The 3 in the city that I heard mentioned were the site of the old jail, Thompson, and Hopewell. The one outside was Fullerton. Those have been mentioned from the beginning. And the city was not at the table. And every time we were asked,
Can you lean
every
in?
time that we were asked, it was wait, it's not time yet. Wait, wait, wait. And I think that time came a long time ago. So the fact that you are doing this meeting, these meetings now, is huge. It's huge. And people who might not realize that this has all been talked about forever, I get that, but it's not brand new that it could be close. And I just want to say about the what were they thinking kind of thing. I say that when I go into most women's bathrooms. I say that when I try to open my front door in our neighborhood and you cannot open it the whole way because she lives in my neighborhood. The drop down thing, you hit that, you can't even open your door. So all I would say is in any kind of situation like your transition team, I think it's good to have someone on your team who has new eyes that don't know the way a jail looks. You know what I mean? Because an outside perspective can be amazing. Like, whoa, why is that? So that's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you for your public comment.
I can't write what my topic was.
Whoever's next, feel free to come forward. You could set up a line if you wanted. Also, this is pretty low-key event. You're welcome at this table.
Hi, my name is Becca Kreth. I also live in the neighborhood that's right next to the Thompson PUD site. Again, completely understand the need for a new jail. Want that to be something that's beneficial to our community and not detrimental, and alongside environmental impact, looking and seeing whether or not you can even put a building there in the first place. I would strongly encourage this body, this financial body, to consider funding community impact reports and studies to see how this will actually impact not just our neighborhood, but the neighborhood that's being added with the Habitat for Humanity houses, the potential new development that's happening behind the Millennium apartment complex, Catalan, et cetera, making sure that whichever placement is actually chosen, not just the land is considered, but also the people who live there. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Thank you for being here. Come on up. You are welcome at this table.
Nobody will be able to read that. My name is Rob Deppert. I also live in the neighborhood adjacent to this. When I first heard about it was on the 4th of July, sitting around a bunch of politicians who said they had chosen to put this jail there at the Thompson site. And we had since then online gotten information about what the site looks like, and it basically looks like it's adjacent to the park in our neighborhood, and just beyond the newer neighborhood they're building for Habitat for Humanity. And it seems like our neighborhood, if you want to do an experiment or build either low-income housing, or there's a community kitchen right there, there's 2 sets of homeless shelters right there. There's Housing Solutions houses is right next to there, adjacent to that. Evergreen Community was for lower income people too, and we're right next to Country View. So when I worked for HUD, under a HUD grant during the 90s, there was a concept of scatter site. Things should be built, that's why they voucherized out a lot of the HUD support, so that not all of that is built in one area. Because what you're doing in one area is building all of that. So if you think about from where I sit, I can walk out into my yard, I can see Country View, I can see the new Habitat homes, I'll be able to almost see the jail from where that's at. And when I think about it, if you want a jail and all these facilities, it makes sense that it is in town, not next to where you're proposing building 6,000 more residential units, which is going to be just to the west of there, from my understanding, from Weimer on. It's kind of adjacent to an elementary school. It makes a lot more sense to me to put it at the Hopewell site, to be honest with you. The current jail is at 7th and College, which is right in the middle of town. If you think of the Hopewell site, you don't have to do any environmental studies. You're not going to have to hook up sewage because there was a huge hospital there to begin with. A lot of what is needed infrastructure-wise already exists there, and you're not going to have to tear up new land to build it. So when I start thinking of the costs and what would it take to build this, and should it be right in town, we don't need another little bitty residential neighborhood like Hopewell, where they're going to build some buildings where there's more retail site. All this retail site we've built in the new buildings, the first floor retail site, hardly any of the new construction, it's not been rented. So that's all Hopewell is you're just building more buildings with first floor residential retail. And right now, if you look within about a half a mile of there, about 80% of that's empty anyway. So when I look at it, it just doesn't make any sense to me to pull that all the way down Rogers Street, which you can't expand because you just put huge power lines in there made of metal that are, I don't know, 1,000 feet tall. Maybe that's an exaggeration.
Thank you for your comment.
They're very large. So you're never going to expand Rogers. So if you're
Thank you for your comment.
Oh, I'm at 3 minutes. I'm sorry. Had a lot to say.
Appreciate
Thank
you
very
being
much.
here. Thank you for your comment. Come on up. You are welcome at this table.
Am I about to take communion? I feel like
I know it's a
also
little,
with you, Peter.
yeah.
Okay.
But nonetheless, you are welcome.
Thank you. All right, so I did not even really plan on making comment today, so it might be a little bit jumbled. But since we're talking about,
Can you
the
state your
current,
name, please?
Oh, Maria Douglas. I wear several hats in the community. Been here since 1993. Live in the county.
Thank you.
Thank you. So anyway, since we're talking about the current system, which some of us may agree has been broken since the inception, we need to talk about, you were talking about people first, and I think that is fantastic. And so one thing that I wanted to point out is that the sheriff was hired by the people for his expertise. And it's similar, we visited, we being the Monroe County Women's Commission, but I'm not necessarily speaking on that behalf right now. We visited the jail and spent quite a bit of time there having conversation. And what struck me was it seemed like this was an organizational structure, cultural change that was needed, that needs to happen. And it's from this level of management that wants that, and then this level of management or oversight or C-suite, if you will, is not quite sure yet. So he's asking for tools to carry out his strategies of making the jail a safer place, to make it more treatment oriented to reduce recidivism and things like that, and he needs people to do that. So I'm just not clear if he hasn't said, I need this, this, and this is the line item, this is the dollar number that it will take, and if that's been presented to you guys say yes, there's money, or no, there's money, or we're going to find money, or we need to find money, that sort of thing. So I'm just not sure where that disconnect is, and so. Yeah, that's just kind of what I'm seeing. If you've ever been through an organizational restructure or reculturing situation, it just kind of seems that way, to me, that this level of management is asking, I need these things for the people who, to give to my people who take care of the people, right? And it just doesn't seem like he's getting a lot of support or a lot of support to do that. So that's just a little confusing. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. I don't see anybody else on Zoom. So whoever is next here in that Hill room, please come on up. You are welcome.
Hello, I'm Julie Hardesty, a resident of Monroe County, and today I'm giving public comment as a County Council appointed member of the Monroe County Women's Commission. Currently, the Women's Commission's purpose states the Commission shall serve in an advisory role to assist residents, businesses, and the government of Monroe County in addressing issues of gender equity in all aspects of society. Regarding today's topic, jail construction and operation, the Women's Commission toured the current jail with Sheriff Martin, Jail Commander Gibbons on August 24th. Based on this experience, along with the research we have conducted and taking in the discussions at these topical meetings this summer, we support the Sheriff's strategies and recommend the following for any new facility, any new physical facilities. Co-located services for diversion, treatment, courts, and probation with access to public transportation, publicly available policies and procedures, publicly available and regularly updated data regarding the jail population, adequate separate spaces by gender in the new facility for all aspects of healthcare, programming, and family visitation, which has been shown to improve post-release outcomes for women, substantial increase over the current jail in individual cells to support the safety needs of inmates with camera-enabled monitoring of all such cells. All of that being said, and because we won't see a new jail occupied until 2028, the Women's Commission is asking that Sheriff Martin and Commander Gibbons receive the funds needed to make the following happen immediately. Funding for requested staff positions that will have an impact on the very things that we have been talking about. Our understanding is that includes an additional female correctional officer, a substance use caseworker, an outreach programmer, a jail program director, and the transitional team. We are gathering our recommendations and references into a summary document to share with the County Council and County Commissioners, and we will continue to engage with gender equity and justice response issues surrounding the new jail facility and our current justice services beyond the end of the Justice Fiscal Advisory Committee. We have opportunity to make new facilities and services better, but we need change now.
Thank you for your comment. And while Ms. Hardesty is signing in, there is a email address on the JFAC website, on the county's website, where you can send materials to us. We do get them. So thank you for sending things in.
Yes, we can do that. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right, would anybody else like to come up and offer public comment? We are here to listen. Welcome.
This is daunting.
Oh.
My name is Lee Gruntafer. I'm with Care Not Cages. I wanted to start out with this DLZ. You know, when the DLZ was chosen through the RFQ process, we went to the open door laws of the state, and we got confirmation that that process was undemocratic. No changes were made. DLZ, no offense, was chosen behind closed doors. And that's unfortunate. You say you want public comment, but then you, at that point, didn't want our comment through that process. And as Mayor Hamilton alluded to earlier, the CJRC committee, which is supposed to work on issues of community justice, was suspended in April. There's been nothing about it from the county commissioners. Were there working groups being formed? Were there treatment groups? Who knows? We don't know. Again, the public doesn't know because I don't know why, because it feels like the only solution is to build a new jail. And while I have no idea about the new jail, I know that there are things that we can do today to help the people that are in that facility that we're not doing because we're fighting about a new jail. And for those people who are here because of the Thompson site, they've already spent the money for the environmental study and the geotechnical study, and they were supposed to do, and maybe they're working on a socio-cultural study of your area. I don't know, but on the 21st, there'll be a meeting at 6 o'clock at the Hub, which we will be there to discuss issues of the new jail for people in that community. An investment in people is what we want. An investment for the correctional officers, for sure, but we want people to be invested in. And it doesn't seem like the people that we're trying to serve are being served currently. I read through some of the links for this meeting. One of them was from the Stepping Up initiative, which was a very interesting thing. And from Johnson County, Kansas, they had a little brief mental health, wellness upon intake where it talked about, are you on any current medication? And do we do that? We don't know. Is there a dashboard about what kinds of people are in the jail? This dashboard of the jail has been thrown around since I've started coming to these meetings 2 or 3 years. So,
Thank you for your
but still
comments.
nothing has been done. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Are there others that would like to make public comment this evening? Coming up, you are welcome.
Hello, Hello, my name's Quentin Deppert, longtime, lifetime resident of Bloomington. I didn't have a lot of comments. I just wanted to say that because you're deciding where you want to fund the construction to happen right now, it would have been really nice to see in this meeting some GIS maps. You know, if you've got these locations picked out, I want to know what the location is, what the total acreage you're buying. I think John Hamilton actually touched on that earlier. And yeah, you know, if you're trying to provide public information here, you have to go the limit and actually show us that information that's going into your considerations. Again, someone mentioned earlier about the Hopewell site. I would say that's also a really good location. You have a parking garage right there as well that's already built. It's perfectly structurally, you know, has structural integrity. It's got water, sewer lines, yada, yada. And most importantly, Centerstone is literally across the street from it. So when you talk about a continuum of care, it's really important that it's literally a continuum and not broken up by blocks and blocks. It should literally be right there. You know, and not to mention you've got Beacon and so on. Yeah. So that's really all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment and thank you for being here. Are there others who wish to make public comment this evening? We do have a hand raised on Zoom. Commissioner Githens, the floor is yours for 3 minutes.
Yes, I've heard several times this evening comments about the Hopewell site. We asked the city of Bloomington about using that for the jail, and we were, it was not an option for us, but it was one that we would have liked to have been able to consider. Thank you.
Commissioner Githens, thank you for your public comment. Are there others who wish to make public comment this evening? Seeing none, are there any last minute comments that anyone wants to make here? Any of my colleagues, that is. Yes, Councilmember Crossley.
I'll keep it brief. I had a brain lapse, so I'm trying to get back, and I got my Beyonce fan going. It's hot in here. So there's that. So that being said, I definitely appreciate the conversation that we have had. And welcome to the new people that have come to the meetings. Some of y'all in this room have sent me emails, and I'm very grateful for those emails, and I've also responded back to every last one of those. I appreciate Commissioner Githens and stepping up and saying the conversation related to Hopewell, and how that's something that's already, to my knowledge, and I asked my colleague here on the city to chime in as well. To me, I think that's already been said and done. But to other people's point that we have heard from today is how we can do things right now. If you've not attended and have not paid attention to the things that I have continued to say, and some of the other folks here have continued to say, I do think that that is something that we are really trying to do. It might not seem like it, but I do think that we are genuine and trying to figure out the things that we can do right now. The folks that are incarcerated and passed, there's somebody. And I hope that everybody can have some sense of compassion for those that are in there, and also compassion for us trying to figure out how we have gotten to this place and how we can work beyond. I am of the mindset that I do think that we have to figure out other alternatives to funding things to reduce recidivism instead of just building full steam jail ahead. That is definitely something that is near and dear to me as well. Are we there yet? No. Do I definitely think we need to be there yet? Hell yeah. And so with that being said, I still welcome more community input, more emails for me to respond to, more conversations. I do know, and I really want to point that out as well, that, for those that are interested in the Thompson site, we have not had a scheduled listening session. So there has been nothing behind the doors of that. When that does come out, we will definitely let everybody know and try to get that out to the masses. Because I do think that sometimes government, and as electeds, we do think that other people think like us and they automatically know what's going on. And it's clear that folks have not. And so how do we do that? It's just getting the word out and spreading correct information instead of some of the misinformation that I have seen. That being said, I definitely appreciate the conversation that we've had. I welcome and challenge any and all to continue to have the conversations with us and encourage folks to come next week with an open mind and ready for discussions. I know that the county is responsible for the upkeep of the jail facility, but I also am of the mindset that it is not just the county's responsibility that it is a community-wide. That is not just city, that is just not county, that is community, that is everybody in this room, that is everybody well beyond South Walnut, that is also the folks at Indiana University, that is also IU Health, Monroe Hospital, that is all of the above. And so we are trying very hard to get those stakeholders to be a part of the conversation, but if we cannot get them here, then what does that say about them? But besides that point, we are here and we are trying to make things happen right now. And I'll leave it at there. So I'm appreciative of the conversations and continue to look forward to next week's meeting.
You want to follow that?
No. But I do have one thing I wanted to add.
All right.
I just, first of all, sincerely thank you all for being here and showing your support and making public comment. It is very valuable and we do listen to it. And to the point of hearing from the neighbors and neighborhoods affected by wherever we locate a facility, that has been something that we did talk about at the meeting where we decided to do the environmental study and the geological study of this Thompson site. We also requested that we do a community study, and we haven't moved forward with that I know of yet, but that is certainly part of the information that I know my colleagues and I are expecting, and I do not think that just advertising our meetings and asking for public comment constitutes that in any way. So we're planning to do some outreach, and I will be talking to our office about that.
Our next scheduled meeting is 1 week from today at 4:30 p.m. We will be discussing the comprehensive list of recommendations that have come out of these meetings. Please join us in this room or on Zoom. This meeting is adjourned.